I have gotten certainly more sensitive when I share things on things now. If somebody asks me personally, okay, where did you go to get this picture? If I know them or I can look at what they do and get a feel for them, I'll tell them privately about it. I won't actually just write it out in Facebook or Instagram or something like that, exactly where it was and how I did it. And that's the best I can do.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 420 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. I'm your host, Matt Payne, and this week I'm excited to sit down with one of my fellow Muench Workshops instructors, Greg Vaughn. He's an accomplished photographer, educator, and author whose journey through the world of photography has taken some fascinating turns. Greg has written 3 books, including 2 highly regarded guidebooks. In this episode, we discuss what goes into crafting a photography guidebook, how he chooses locations, the challenges of location sharing in the age of social media, and the ethics of gatekeeping in nature photography. We also explore what it takes to make a full-time career in this field, the rewards and challenges of teaching workshops, and what advice Greg has for those looking to take the leap into professional photography. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment and thank our newest Patreon supporters, Wendy Bagnall, Sandra Swanson, Cindy Christensen, Kurt Lawson, and Zach Brown. Your support helps to keep this podcast alive, and I'm so grateful for your generosity. If you'd like to join our incredible Patreon community and help support the show, please head over to patreon.com/fstop and listen. Every contribution makes a huge difference. Now, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Greg Vaughn. All right, Greg Vaughn, it's awesome to finally have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Matt, for inviting me to be on it. It's quite an honor. You've had all of my heroes on there and introduced me some new people that I didn't know about, and now I'm a big admirer of. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. And I've been talking with a few people about this, but I feel like you're one of those photographers that doesn't give yourself enough credit. Like you sell yourself short. Like you're one of the most accomplished modern nature photographers. And when I asked you to come on the show, you're like, me? Who am I?
Well,
I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah. That's been a thing with me. Actually, yeah. So. Yeah, in fact, years ago, I got a postcard in the mail inviting me to a camp out in Canyonlands National Park for the first annual meeting of the ASSOs. And it came from George Lepp. And I'm thinking, what is this about? So the first annual, the ASSOs were ASSHO. It's the American Society of Scenic Herd-Ofs. Because it was common, in the old days with Dikinga and Jeff Foote and Larry and Donna Ulrich and those people. You go out somewhere and you see some photographer who looks like he knows what he's doing. And you want to go up and be friends and you say, hi, how are you? My name's Greg. Who are you? And the guy would say, my name's Glenn. He said, oh, yeah, I've heard of you. Even if you had no clue about who the guy was, you'd always say, I've heard of you. And it established a real thing. And so I went to that meeting and it was magic to meet with some of the people that I admired the most. John Shaw was there, George Lepp. Like I say, Jack Dikinga, all these guys that had just been like, I looked up to, and for me to be invited to that was like, wow. So, yeah, but it's true. I tend to not promote myself very much. There's always been a weak point. But thanks for asking me.
Of course. Yeah. And, I think it's because you're humble, and being humble is good. But also, I feel like photographers have a hard time celebrating their successes. I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone.
Yeah.
And so that's partly why I love to do this podcast is I force people like you to look in the mirror and say, I actually have done some cool stuff.
Yes. Right. I have to admit I have. Yeah. And then, the new year is a good time to reflect on that stuff too,
Yeah.
Go back what happened here.
So Greg, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about who Greg Vaughn is, and maybe kick us off by talking about who are all those children in the background?
Okay. Well, I'm Greg Vaughn. I currently live in Eugene, Oregon. I've been here for about 30 years, and for 25 years before that, I lived in Hawaii. I moved to Hawaii to go to school right after high school. I went to the University of Hawaii, got my degree in zoology while I was there. Met a lovely young lady who we've been together now for 55 years and married for 53 of those. So it's been a great time. My wife is a special education teacher for many years. She retired, still wanted to play with the babies. So now we have a childcare business in our house. So if you hear little kids in the background, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So that
And
makes her
that
happy.
and that probably keeps you nice and young, right?
It helps, it really does. And it's fun. I've had a home office for probably 40 years now, since, I had a studio at one time that I was sharing with some other commercial photographers. And I realized I was doing studio jobs just to pay the rent in the studio. And it wasn't my kind of work. And so I just gave that up. But it was a good experience. Talking about promotion, one of the guys I shared with was a man named Robert Knight, who was probably the most successful commercial photographer in Hawaii at that time. He's still in New Zealand now. And Robert told me, he said, I'm just an average photographer, but I really know how to sell me. And that was a really good lesson for me. I've never really followed up on it enough. It was really good advice.
Still good advice to this day.
It is. So I work on it. That's why
Yeah.
I'm here, Matt. Okay.
That's hey, it's never too late, Greg. It's never too late.
That's right. Right.
So as you've alluded to, you've had a pretty winding path in photography. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about kind of what your journey looked like and how you arrived at where you're at today.
It has been a long and winding road. Yes. So yeah, since I was a kid, cameras, photography have been a part of my life. And so has traveling and, exploring nature. My grandparents, my uncles have all had cameras. We get together for family get-togethers, Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff. And Grandma or Uncle Ken would bring out their big 4x5 Linhof, take a big group shot. Now, I still have some of those in my closet of, panoramic views with all of us in there. My dad always had a camera for our vacations. We would take almost every Sunday, we'd go for a Sunday drive somewhere, and we'd go to a museum or a botanical garden or a park somewhere, something like that. So, and I had a camera from when I was really small. I sold my first picture when I was 12 years old. I took my little Brownie Starmite to my cousin Marilyn's wedding reception and took a whole roll of black and white 127 size film of that. And when I got back the little 3x3 inch square pictures from that, I showed them to my Uncle Ken, and he liked one of them so much he gave me a silver dollar.
There you go.
So that was my first sale. So, but I didn't get serious about it until I was well into my college years in Hawaii. I'd always had a camera. Up through that, I took snapshots of trips and things and recording and our friends. But I didn't really get serious about it. And my only formal training in photography at all was a course in photography and a zoology course about how to take pictures in aquariums and terrariums and underwater and through microscopes and things like that. Otherwise, pretty much entirely self-taught, magazines and books, and a lot of trial and error, a lot of wasted film, a lot of wasted time in the dark room and paper and stuff like that. But I think, what got me really into it was a couple of things. There was one night I went to a party with some really good friends of mine, and I'd picked up this old Polaroid camera, and I took a snapshot of a group of us friends just talking and stuff, and I peeled that apart, and I said, you know what? I've preserved this moment in time forever with this picture, and I can look at that picture in 20 years if I don't lose it or something. And remember that time and the good times we had and those people. And I thought that was really cool. And so I started getting a little bit more serious about it. And then with another party one time, we were all sitting around and some friends said, hey, we should start a little magazine for the college crowd in Waikiki. And it was kind of like, one of my friends had experience in graphic design. Somebody had done some publications before. My best friend was a really good poet. His sister was an editor at some other magazine. And Chris said, well, Greg's got a camera. He could be the photographer. And I went, okay. They gave me free concert tickets. So I got to see a lot of concerts, and I started off doing stuff. And about that time, I built my own first darkroom. I just had a little cubby hole underneath the steps of the place we were renting, and I lined the walls with black plastic and hung up a little orange lamp. Made my first enlarger out of an old single shot slide projector hung from a pipe, and bought some developing trays. And that first time that print came up in the developer, it was like, I'm hooked. That was the magic, to see a print come up. And I don't know, these days people that come up entirely through digital have never had that experience. It's really something. And I would say, photographers in my generation that had that was a major step in their life, is when that first print comes up there. So anyway,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting for me to talk to people from like the generation before me, such as yourself, where photography was much more rooted in kind of experiential, like memory formation and preservation of events, and like remembering what happened here, and like it had much more of a linkage to experience, versus what I see a lot of people from my generation associating photography with is like, I don't even know how to say it, but like it's more driven by social media and getting likes and like feeding a hedonic treadmill kind of a situation. And so I'd be curious to hear your perspective on kind of from where you've sat from, your perspective, and like seeing how that's shifted over the years, and kind of how that's made you feel as someone from that previous time period.
I'm really glad I had that experience. I think it's with you. You and several other photographers you've had on there, is you got into photography to document your hikes and your mountain climbing, right? And Galen Roll did that, right? These people, many of the ones that are in between my generation and then up to this latest social media thing, where, I don't know, making the picture is the experience rather than being out in the wild is the experience. Seems to be a difference to me. It's trying to get that, right? But I think that for most of us, it was, we love being in the outdoors, exploring nature, trying to help conserve nature as best we can, showing the glory, and in some cases, showing the bad parts too, showing the pollution, showing the devastation of coral reefs and old growth forests and things like that. And now it's, like I say, a little bit different for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like a lot of that perspective also drives your value system, and therefore it also drives kind of like your approach to photography in general. Like, I'm guessing you're very similar to me in that when you're out there making photographs, it's experience first and results later. And
Definitely.
like closing that circle is really the full experience. But like, I'm never out there like, oh, I gotta get this exact shot. At least not anymore,
Right. I would always, over and over again, I've gone out trying to get that exact shot that I had pre-planned. Didn't happen. Never happened. But I found something really great on the way there. And that's happened to me over and over again. Serendipity is my muse many times. It's just,
It's funny because like you and I did a workshop this past summer in the Olympic mountains, and we hiked this long trail, and I think both you and I were like every 15 feet, we were distracted by something else that we wanted to photograph. And we're like looking at our watch. We're like, man, we really got to get back. But oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And I think that approach to photography, at least for me, like it just is much more enjoyable, and you're going to get better results in the long run because you're not motivated by external validation. You're motivated by just having a good time and experiencing nature.
Right. Yep. And seeing and what grabs your eye, kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Over and over again. That works for me. So.
Yeah. So Greg, you've written 3 books over the years, which I think that's what probably most people are going to associate with you. And you've left this really cool legacy behind, and you're photographing Oregon and you're photographing Washington book. So what are the books that you created, and how did those even come to be?
Well, I actually happen to have those books right here.
All right.
Funny thing, right? So this is my first one, photographing Oregon. I'll try and get the sheen off of it with a light. There we go. And then I did photographing Washington also. And the last one that I've done was one just called Oregon, a Photographic Journey. And this is just basically just photos from all over Oregon, both nature, people, events, that kind of a thing that I put together for a company called Far Country Press. And it's kind of like a miniature coffee table book. I wish it was a big coffee table book, but it's a small one. It's designed to be something that people pick up in gift shops as kind of a, spur of the moment purchase kind of a thing. The other books, the Washington and Oregon books, are designed to be for photographers, either beginners or all the way through pros, about where to go in these states and what to see and how to get there, how to photograph it, and as much detail as I can. And they would just, people say, well, how did you get into that? I had years and years ago aspired to be a travel writer and took one kind of extracurricular course in college on that. People told me I was okay, but I didn't pursue it. And then I don't know if you were even around then, but years ago, there was a thing called CompuServe,
Oh, yeah, sure.
right? When, kind of a predecessor to AOL and all that kind of stuff. And there was a photography forum, a chat room on that, the CompuServe Photo Forum. And I got pretty active in that. It was strictly text-based. There were no photos served at that time, although CompuServe was the one that introduced the GIF format to the internet, basically. As part of this group, there was a guy named Laurent Martris, who I became really good friends with. And Laurent had originally was born in France, and he came to the U.S. and just loved the desert Southwest. And he would send pictures back to his friends in Europe, and they would say, oh, send us more details about that. So he ended up putting together a little, Keiko's copy kind of a thing about where you can go. And that got really popular. And he said, gee, maybe I should make a real book and put it on Amazon. Well, that just took off right away with a little self-published thing. And then he went full on into a whole series. There are now a series of 6 or 8 of these books, 3 of them on the Southwest, 2 on California. Tom Till did The World from his travels. Laurent came to me and said, I'd like you to do a book on the Pacific Northwest. And I said, I don't know, that's a big deal. And he said, don't worry about the writing. This is not literary prose. This is, I went here, I saw this, you can go here, and this is what you're going to find out. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And the idea originally was, it was going to be a book about the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Southwest British Columbia, bit into Idaho, Northern California. So since I knew Oregon first, the best, I started with that, and I got going, and I thought, okay, I've done a pretty good job with Oregon. I was not paying any attention whatsoever to page count or word count or anything. I sent that to Laurent, and he called me back, and he said, we got a problem here. He said, you're already over the number of pages I wanted for this book. So we decided that he said, let me work on this. And he came back about a week later, and he said, you know what, this is actually good. We're going to make 2 books. We're going to do Oregon separate and Washington separate, because they have a really different marketability, a different reputation, whatever you want to call it, kind of a thing. So it'd be good. So I got 2 books out of it. I'd have to say, and a bit of bragging, is all the books, all 3 of my books, and every book in this series that Laurent has published has won at least one award from publishing industry or travel industry people. So we're all very proud of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Photographing Oregon, I bought that book when I moved to Portland in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super helpful because I knew nothing about Oregon. Like, I
Yeah,
knew a lot
yeah.
about Colorado, but nothing about Oregon. I'm like, how can I figure out where to go to photograph? And so your book was really helpful in terms of finding places to at least explore and check out. So I think it's a great resource for people, especially if you're not familiar with the place you're living in.
Yeah. People tell me it is, and I'm always happy to hear that. I've had native Oregonians tell me they found places in my book that they didn't know about themselves on there. So that's kind of cool for me. So
And
I enjoy that.
When was it first published?
2009. Yeah.
Yeah.
And And Photographing Oregon is now out of print. We sold out 3 printings worth. And then the cost of printing and shipping and distribution got to be so high that Laurent decided not to reprint any books now that are going out. I still have some copies of Washington left. Oregon is now available as a PDF downloadable ebook, and it's still going good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if
Yeah,
anyone,
yeah.
I could send you guys a signed Greg Vaughn copy of Photographing Oregon.
All right.
I mean, I got to get you to sign it first, but
Right, you can do that next time we meet, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's interesting because I feel like we were having lunch one day on one of our workshops and you were all of a sudden, like you introduced a friend of yours to the table who was happened to be there. And I immediately became aware that like you have this whole separate world that you live in that most photographers are not even like fully aware of. And I think it's more around like nature writing. And can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you
Hmm.
got involved in that and maybe how other people might think about that in terms of a possible way to branch off and do more with their photography?
Yeah, I think just, like I said, the people that I met over the years and got invited to do things, part of it was even, I was very fortunate to get into stock photography when it was really a thing. And as part of that, before there was Getty, there was Tony Stone Images. Before there was Tony Stone, there was Allstock based in Seattle. And Allstock would have a meeting every year with they would invite all of their contributors, photographers, to some place like Vashon Island and the Puget Sound for a weekend. And we had things like DeWitt Jones came and gave his incredible pep talk for us. And I don't know if you've ever listened to one of DeWitt's talks or seen his TED Talks. He's an amazing motivational speaker. So he was there. I got to meet DeWitt. Art Wolf, came and talked to us sometimes. I got to meet people like Gary Brosh, who was really into first old growth forest preservation and then coral reefs kind of a thing. Just so many of these old people. And that by and large, they were making their living doing nature photography. And there was a good market for it in those days, both just for pretty pictures and for environmental causes. And that just kind of since I came from a background in zoology, my degree is zoology, but what I really was into was the whole ecology movement was just happening when I was in college. And I really fell in love with that idea and had intended to go on. Just got kind of sidetracked by the photography, actually. So, and I never looked back, but that's certainly been a big part still of where I concentrate as a natural world.
Before we dive back in, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that might actually make your life a little easier. If you're like me, you put everything into capturing the perfect photograph. But when it comes time to name it, write a description, or even price it, it can feel overwhelming. That's where Art Helper comes in. This AI-powered tool is designed for artists and photographers to take the guesswork out of presenting and marketing your work. It helps generate compelling titles, rich descriptions, and even custom artist statements, so your images connect with buyers and collectors effortlessly. But it doesn't stop there. Do you need help writing blog posts, social media captions, or emails to your audience? Art Helper has you covered. Struggling to find the right Facebook groups or subreddits to share your work? It can help with that too. You can even get AI-powered pricing suggestions for your prints. Now, I'll be honest, I tend to be skeptical of AI tools for creative work, but I gave Art Helper a try, and I have to say, it's actually pretty robust and functional. If you've ever felt stuck when it comes to the business side of photography, this might be worth checking out. Don't take my word for it, give it a shot. Find a link to this awesome tool in the show notes. All right, let's get back to this week's episode. What is the organization that y'all belong to that's for nature writers? What's that called?
Yeah, NANPA, North American Nature Photography Association. I highly recommend it. It's a really good organization that is both supportive of nature photographers for advocating things like, making the BLM and Forest Service rules a little bit less onerous, but also really promoting ethics in outdoor photography. It's a great thing. They're going to be having their annual summit, they call it, in-person meeting in Tucson in I think it's late March. I may get the dates wrong, but it's going to be a great thing. A lot of great people will be there. I think Art Wolf's going to be there, Franz Lanting, Jack Kinga, a whole bunch of new people also. I highly recommend the organization.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
and they've got a Facebook page and a website also, nanpa.org, if anybody wants to go on there. It's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Greg, you brought up the subject of ethics, and
Uh,
I was curious to pick your brain a little bit about your books.
yeah.
And obviously, there's been a lot of changes in the ecosystem of photography since the book was published.
Yeah.
Instagram wasn't really even a thing back in 2009. Like a lot of stuff has happened since then.
Right.
So, two of your books are very location driven,
Hmm.
like how do you get there, all that kind of fun stuff.
Right.
How did you decide which locations to include or exclude, and how would you approach that challenge today, knowing the impact of social media and location sharing?
I'd be a little more careful about it, a little more restrictive. There are places in both Washington and Oregon that I purposely did not include. People were always after me after the Oregon book out, why is not Thor's Well in there? Everybody wants to go to Thor's Well. Well, I've been to Thor's Well. It's a really great place. I think it's a really environmentally sensitive place because most people go out there, and to get to the shot right on the edge of the Thor's Well thing, many people just trample all over the seaweed and the urchins and the barnacles and all that to get there. They're totally clueless about that. There is a way to get out there by walking on bare sand and rock if you're really careful about it. But I knew people wouldn't do that. I'd already seen too much damage. Places like Reflection Lake at Mount Rainier. It used to be you could get right down to the lakeshore down there. And there were only a couple little places of pathways. And now they've had to block it off to getting down there because so many people went down and just trampled all the vegetation. They were just ruining it. There are places in both Washington and Oregon that I purposely did not publish petroglyph sites, especially because they get damaged. You put those out there, that's commonly available, they're going to get trashed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there's a few others. There's a few places that I wish I hadn't put in there. So the picture that is the kind of the frontispiece on the Oregon book is down at Thundering Rock Bay, kind of a thing. It was just, when I first went down there, I'd never seen the place before. I just went down some little trail and found this great view looking down the coast of these little sea stacks and stuff. And I published it and didn't exactly give exact directions how to get there. But I went back about 4 years later and I was just astounded about how the trails had just been a mess. Vegetation had been trampled. Everybody wants to get even closer and closer, get a little bit more shot. There was a lot of erosion going on. And I regret putting that one in there, actually. But there are places that I did purposely leave out on both of those books because of that. I think now I would probably also just more emphasize in the book with every location about, let's take care of this place. Be careful where you walk, okay? Save it for future generations, future photographers, not just yourself.
Yeah, it's hard. It's too bad that these are the kinds of things that we have to think about as people who are trying to make a living in nature photography, because inevitably, like, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly faced with these kind of ethical, moral kind of dilemmas. Like when you're leading workshops, it's like, should I take somebody here? Like, is it actually a good idea to take a group of people to this spot or not? And of course, the approach I've taken is that if I can take the time to educate our group on, the proper things to look out for and
exactly
how to treat that place, I feel pretty comfortable with that decision-making process. But at the same time, it's like I feel fairly neutral. Like it's ideally I wouldn't take anyone there, but so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on gatekeeping and locations in nature photography, especially as it relates to leading workshops and, publicizing our photography.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, like you, when we're on the workshops, I try to educate people that are on there about, okay, this is a really sensitive area. and we're going to stay on the trail. We're not going to get off, and I'll call people. If I see somebody getting off trail and stepping on a plant, I'm going to be on them about that kind of a thing. And they usually get it. It's just like
I've seen that in person.
yeah, they're so enamored of the big scene out there that they're not watching where their feet are going, or they want to get just a little bit closer to, this clump of flowers or something like that. So I've thought about restricting some of the places that I go on the workshops. I take people, but I think it's more important to show them how beautiful this is and why it's worth preserving, why it's worth being careful about it, and encouraging them to do so on there. In particular, when we go down to a couple of places on the Oregon coast, what used to be what Secret Beach is called, no longer a secret. It's all over the place, and it's so popular now that you're usually going to be a bunch of other people down there as well. But it's so spectacular. I don't want to not have my workshop people or my friends not see something that says glorious. And hopefully it will get the message to them about, let's make sure we preserve these places. Let's take care of them and spread the word that way is the idea. We do have to be careful, and there's some places I won't take people.
Yeah, I know in circles I run in, those books that Laurent published about the American Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that, spend a lot of time in those areas don't have a lot of good things to say about those books because they've seen a significant impact on those places because of those books. Now, I'm not going to say like shame on that guy for publishing those books.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, it's just too bad that, people can't take that information and be like, oh, this is a special place. Like, let's treat it with some respect. And unfortunately, we've been around long enough to see that happen. And we kind of know, like, if I share this, it means people are going to not treat it well. Even if you tell them you need to treat this with respect, a lot of people are like, I'm not going to listen to that guy. I'm just going to go there. Thank you for the information. Bye.
Right. It is a problem. It's a real conundrum for us that are trying to both help other photographers but protect the environment as well. It's a thing. Yeah. I think Laurent would agree. It is. And I think Laurent probably is same as me. There's a few places we wish we hadn't have, promoted so much, maybe, kind of a thing. And who knew, these books are now 10 and more years old, some of them. And at that time, there wasn't a problem so much of all the selfie takers and, people trying to get even more extreme every time, with their drones and all their stuff, right? Go back to. So,
yeah, I mean, a lot of it's driven by social media, right? Like it
is. Yeah.
I mean, I like to call the generation that came up through social media, like it's the look at me generation. Like you look at their Instagram feeds and it's all selfies. It's all like, look at me at this place, look at me at this place. And it's super vapid and hollow. And there's no, look at these amazing experiences and these amazing places. It's just like, look at me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest parasite of all is like people are so self-absorbed in their approach to visiting these places that they actually miss out on the full spectrum of what spending quality time in these places can actually offer you.
Yes, that's very true. Very true. I see that wherever I go now, right? So let's get the selfie for social media as the prime thing for so many people, right?
Yeah.
But also I don't want to be a gatekeeper. There was some backlash to all this stuff, in the past about not sharing any information about this. Photographers, it would post a picture and they would say as the location, some total place that wasn't it, or just they would use the same location for every picture that they posted. And all of us knew that wasn't true, but I think you can be sensitive about it. And I have gotten certainly more sensitive when I share things on things now. If somebody asks me personally, okay, where did you go to get this picture? If I know them or I can look at what they do and get a feel for them, I'll tell them privately about it. I won't actually just write it out in Facebook or Instagram or something like that, exactly where it was and how I did it. And that's the best I can do. I mean, because I'm all about sharing. I mean, that's what these books are about. I think they have helped. Like I say, I would try and get more in every location, say, and here, watch out for this, and let's save this, okay, for the next guy and
Right.
everything. So,
And I like what you said there because it is nuanced, right? Like I think there's a lot of black and white thinking out there in the community around if you don't share locations, you're a gatekeeper and you're a terrible human being. It's like, no, no, no. I'll share with people that I trust that I can suss out, that I
right,
can
right.
like determine that you're not some kind of horrible human that's gonna go ruin a location for future people. But by just blanket putting everything out there, like here's the GPS coordinates of every one of my photographs, and here I'm gonna send it out, and it, like 500,000 people are gonna see that post on a Facebook group or whatever. Like that's just completely irresponsible. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yes,
nuanced.
yes.
It's nuanced. You have to
It is
think
nuanced.
about it. You have to think
That
about it.
very much, very much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely do.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this before, but I had a post on a Facebook group recently where it just went super crazy viral on this Facebook group because people didn't believe me that I photographed it in Colorado.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of people thought it was AI, which I'm like, it's not AI, it's just a
No.
very interesting image.
Yeah.
And of course, like all these people were calling me a gatekeeper because I refused to tell them exactly where I photographed it. And I had tons of people reach out to me privately and thank me for that, but then also were still curious. And I was happy to tell them, like, yeah, it's in this area. And they're like, they
Right,
look on
right.
Google Earth and like, oh, okay, I can see now the photography potential of that general area. Thank you for sharing, So it's,
Right, right.
people are, and I think that there's like an entitlement part of it too. It's like, I
Yeah,
did a lot of
maybe
homework
so.
to get to that spot.
Exactly. And that's part of the whole thing, right? Is doing the homework and exploring. Not you didn't go to the same place that somebody else went. And those people, especially, want a GPS point for exactly where you stood to take that picture. No, I'll give you the general idea, okay, how to get down to this certain location, but then you find your own picture on it. But I
Yeah.
also, I question those people who refuse to go to some popular place because they think it's already been done. Some of the arches in Utah, kind of a thing. Yeah. It's like, I'm not going there. Everybody's done it already. It's too crowded, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's really popular because it's so spectacular. Why deny myself seeing that, experiencing that myself, just because a bunch of other people have already done it? A bunch of other photographers have got it better than I can do it, maybe. But I want to see it. I want to experience it myself as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I've put a lot of thought into myself because I think I used to sound like one of those people like, oh, that's not good enough for me anymore. Like I need something that's unique and special. And I think again, there's some nuance there. For me, it's always been around like, how do I want to spend my time?
Yeah.
And it's for me, I know that the way that I enjoy the outdoors the most is when I'm not around a lot of other people. And even though it might be the most spectacular scene on earth, if I'm surrounded by other people, it just doesn't feel it. I just don't get the same experience out of it. And so for me,
Right.
it's more about like, I know how those situations impact me psychologically. And I just prefer not to have that happen to me. Whereas if I can find something that's not as crowded, that's equally stunning, that's much more preferable for me. So it's more of a time management thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And I think the thing of it is, though, when I go to one of those places where there's a lot of other people around, but it's really spectacular, I'm usually able to tune out everybody. I can just get so focused myself on what's out there and how I'm going to do my own picture of this, that there can be people a foot away from me and I can tune them out. Unless there's somebody really obnoxious, which occasionally there is. But if I can go to, the big waterfalls in Yellowstone, I can go to the arches, any of those places. And if I see something that I really like and I start working on it and I want to get my picture, I can pretty much tune everybody out, which is good.
Well,
Although I
that
certainly prefer to be out, just with myself, just all totally on my own. Or it's only in the last few years, actually, I've gotten to enjoy going out with a couple of other friends. And I think that's a really good thing also, as you trade impressions, you see, oh, you see it this way. Okay.
yeah.
That's interesting, or I walked right by something and caught this guy's eye, kind of a thing. So I've enjoyed doing that a lot more in recent times. And that's one of the things I like about the workshops too, is I go to some place that I've been to before, I know it, and then somebody else comes along who's never been there and they see something entirely different. And
I
I go,
love
ooh, how did I miss that? Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that about our workshops.
yeah. I think
It's
you did that with me at Olympic National Park last year. You saw things really differently than I ever seen. And I was like, oh yeah, I want that now too. But
yeah, it's
I try not to comp stop.
yeah, and I don't know about you, but like actually that's one of the most enjoyable parts about doing workshops is that you get to see other people's perspectives on the world and you get to help them kind of suss that out and
Right,
tease
right.
it out and like figure out how to maximize on what they're seeing. But I think just being exposed to so many different viewpoints, it only makes you a better photographer.
It does. It really does. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly. Yes, I get as much. I always tell people, I'm going to get as much out of this workshop for me as you're going to get out of it, hopefully. Right. Well, I always learn something too.
Yeah. So Greg, how many years have you been doing photography full time?
I count it back to about 1974,
So
75.
longer than I've been alive. That's
I, it just occurred to me when I was doing a workshop with Taylor last year in Death Valley. I'm now working with people that are younger than my sons. I went, oh, this is something, but I really enjoy it. And it's really great to get the younger perspective. People have come up with a totally different journey, pathway to photography than me. I see so many photographers that they had a job in tech field or something like that, or manufacturing, law, whatever. They got burnt out on it, but they'd saved enough money that they could just take a year or two off and dive into photography, and now they're leading workshops,
yeah.
kind of a thing. And it was like, man, I struggled for years. So it was like, photography has been what I've done now for all this time. I've loved doing it. The times have been thin. Fortunately, my wife and I have always agreed it's most important for us to do what we love doing and to live where we want to live. And certainly there's been some thin times. Now we're both reached a point in our lives where we're pretty successful in both of our fields and are pretty comfortable. It's very, very rewarding that way. So, yeah.
And how long have you been teaching full time?
Let's see. I did my first workshop in 2012, actually.
Okay.
It was
So
some guy, just random phone call. This guy calls me up. He says, I got your Oregon book and I want to hire you to do a workshop. And I went, well, you've got the book. It's right there. And he said, no, no, no. I want you to take me around personally to these places and show it to me. I've been in workshops before. I know how they work. And he says, name your price. And, I want to do the Oregon coast and maybe the Columbia River Gorge. And I said, let me think about this. I hung up and I immediately went online to all the photographers I could think of in the Northwest. Do you do workshops? How much do you charge? So I went back and I called the guy back. We had a nice conversation and we agreed. And he came out with his wife and another photographer friend. And it was a wonderful experience for me. I got to show them places that were my favorites. They're just super people. They had told me, we don't need any instruction. We just want you to show us all the good places. Well, we got out there and I said, yeah, maybe you need a little bit of instruction too. So I helped them out. And that was the start of a very long relationship of doing ones. And the young woman is also still one of my clients. She's actually a Muench Workshops client as well now. The guy unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but it was a great experience for me of doing that. He was also a big help for me as much as I helped him. He was very much into promotion and how do you handle yourself on these things. He'd been on many workshops before and including a lot of Muench workshops now. So
yeah.
it was a great thing. And I just found that I really loved doing it. It was a lot of fun. I got to show people spectacular places. I got to help them out. It's also, a little bit of an ego thing. I know more than you do. So, it's always been a good experience for me. And I've been really fortunate now. This is my 10th year of working with Muench Workshops. I've never had a real problem client. I've had some that were a bit of a challenge. I've heard horror stories from some of the other guys about some clients, but I've been really lucky, knock on wood, that I've had great people all the time.
Yeah. The reason I asked those two questions is because I wanted to ask you a really serious question about full-time photography work. So you've been doing full-time for over 40 years,
Mhm.
teaching full-time for over a decade. What, thinking about those two things separately but also combined,
Okay.
what qualities do you think are most important for someone to try to do this full-time?
For being just a photographer, whether it's, workshops or not, if you want to do print sales, if you want to do commercial work, if you want to do editorial for magazines, websites, whatever, business sense, which I never had. So I never took any business courses. I'm a terrible business person still. And, people that are really successful about it, they have good business senses also. They come from a background of that, or they study it as well. People who I'm thinking of, Mark, David Duchemin, they come from a marketing background as well. And
Right.
it really helps them be successful in a very short period of time, where I've kind of been a school of hard knocks, a lot of trial and error throughout my career, and I'm really happy to be as successful as I am now. I think that's, you have to realize if you're thinking about going full time into some photography field, about 10% of your time is going to be making the pictures. The rest of it's going to be business, janitoring, cleaning up, packing, going, logistics, all that kind of a stuff, bookkeeping, all the not fun things. And now social media marketing, is the biggest way to market these days, right?
Yeah,
So,
and even that's questionable, like with
yeah,
how everything's shifting so quickly into video
right.
format. And
Yeah.
I'm not convinced social media is all that useful anymore, but that's me.
It is with some people. When I started off, everybody had a physical portfolio. We'd carry around a portfolio case
Right.
with, all of our tear sheets and, 16 by 20 or 11 by 14 prints and kind of a thing. And now it's like your website or your web page or whatever is kind of a deal. But I have had a couple of clients actually tell me they found me and hired me or bought my photos from my social media posts, kind of a
Huh.
thing. So I keep
Interesting.
doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
keeps them
All right.
alive.
And
So
then as it relates to teaching full time, what do you think is the
yeah,
differentiators there?
I think probably both of us have heard from our clients before. They went on a workshop with somebody and they got us there, and then they went off and did their own thing. And I think if you're going to do workshops, you really have to be loving teaching as well as making photographs yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're really upfront about it to begin with and say to everybody, hey, I'll just get you out there and then you're on your own. And some people will be fine with that.
Right.
But I've heard stories over and over again about going over with somebody and sometimes some big names. And they get them out there and it's just kind of like, well, you're on your own. I'm going to go take my pictures now. And I think, with our Muench Workshop experience is we're right there with the clients all the time. We're not taking pictures of our own until we're pretty satisfied that our clients are taken care of. They've got their setup, they've got the idea, or we're demonstrating to them by taking our own pictures, our process, what we're seeing, what our settings are, why we're including this and excluding that kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So I think that's key is you need to be teaching people and taking care of people, not just using workshops as a way to get your way paid to go somewhere.
Yeah, and it's obviously you could be the best photographer on planet Earth, but not necessarily be a great teacher or a great workshop
Yep.
leader. And the
Yep.
way I always think about teaching workshops, and maybe this is because I have a counseling background, but like I always see it as like I approach it with a lot of curiosity. Like, what do you want to get out of this experience? What do you need help with? And I try to tailor, like literally for every single person who's on the workshop, like I'm going to
Right.
approach them a little bit differently depending on where they're at. Sometimes that's easier said than done based on the logistics or like how busy it is that day or like where we're at, things like that. But,
Right. Right.
I think ultimately we're also providing an experience, right? So it's, you want to make sure people are having fun and it's lighthearted, but they're also like getting good photographs. And so there's a lot to think about.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, that's one of the first things at an intro meeting that I always want to do in our workshops is say, what do you hope to get out of this workshop? What's your favorite kind of photography? What do you like doing the most? And what do you hope to get out of this? Is it just show me the place and leave me alone? Which some people that come on, they're better photographers than I am. They just want to be taken somewhere and taken care of otherwise. And others, they're like, yeah, I'd kind of like to know how to do focus stacking kind of thing. Okay, can do that.
Right.
And so we just want to know individually, and then hopefully we'll take care of that
Yep.
when they
Yep.
go out there.
So earlier we talked about all of the things that you love about teaching, all of the benefits about having other people along, and how that's been very beneficial for your photography. I'd be curious if you could talk a little bit about anything about teaching that you don't love, or in other words, what are the toughest aspects about teaching workshops?
Not much, actually. I enjoy the process. I
Good.
actually enjoy, there's a few workshops that I've come up with the ideas myself and put them together, and I enjoy all that planning kind of a thing. I think I'm pretty good at that. I like helping people. I love showing them around to different places, kind of a thing. I say one of the challenges for me when I go to a new place is scouting the lodging and the restaurants
Right. Yes.
because
Right.
I want to go in my Westphalia and camp out. And, food is just something I do so I can get to the good stuff for me.
Yeah.
To to other people, a good restaurant is really important. The meal of the
I know.
day is so I've got to find those things, and we got to find a hotel or some lodging that's amenable to people that are used to kind of a high end place. They're not going to be happy with a Motel 6. So
Yeah.
I spend my time doing that when I scout a new workshop. I think the sometimes I worry about got to keep everybody happy.
Mm.
Is everybody doing okay here? Are they all right? Are they all getting what they came for? Are they getting their money's worth out of this kind of a thing? And if somebody is not fun, or having a hard time struggling, it can sometimes impact the other people, and that can be a real challenge on there. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the things that's hard for me is matching kind of the level of where people are at in terms of the
yeah,
things that they're frustrated about. Cause like I'm super easygoing and laid back, and I just like kind of roll with the punches. Like if it's bad weather and a specific photograph or scene or place that we had in mind isn't gonna work, I'm not affected by that emotionally or mentally, and I'm completely happy. Like let's just go take a walk up this trail and see what we can find, kind of a thing. And I think that can be a good thing because that can show people like there's other ways to approach photography. But at the same time, I've found that my laid back style maybe it doesn't always jive with some people who are like very anxious
yeah, right,
and like they want to know exactly what's going to happen today and where are the places we're going to go today and what time. Like there's all of these, like there's people who are like, I need to
yeah,
know every minute of the day what we're doing, and I'm like,
right,
man, I don't
yeah,
even know what we're doing after like 10 o'clock, so I don't know
right,
yet.
right,
And so
yeah,
that's been a challenge for me, is like matching people at those levels of anxiety.
definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. There's people that want to know the night before, and then they want to be told again when you first made it the vehicle in the morning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the hard part for me, is the people that have those concerns. It's
mhm,
and it's, I get it. Like I have anxiety about traveling, so like when I do airport stuff, I'm the same way. I'm like,
yeah,
I need to know like all that kind of stuff way in advance. But at the same time, like when it comes to being on a trip, for me, like that's not fun. Like not you're not going to have a good time if you're that worried about every single moment of the day. So my advice
right,
always,
right,
like, it doesn't always stick, but like the first meeting, I'm like, hey, I know it might be outside of your comfort zone, but just go with the flow, and like you're gonna
right.
have a much better experience, I promise.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Good point to say that to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that I find a challenge occasionally is sometimes you'll get a client who just wanders off on their own. I always like to say, if you're going to go somewhere besides the group, and I encourage people, I do not like when I see workshops and everybody's lined up in a row. They've all
Right.
got their tripods next to each other. They've all got the same 70 to 200 millimeter lens, on there. They're shooting the same thing. I really encourage people, you know, go over there, get down low, get up higher if you can,
Use a
try
different
something else.
lens. Yeah.
Use a different lens, kind of a thing. Try a long shutter speed instead of a fast one, that kind of a thing. And I have some clients who they get somewhere and they're just gone. I get to trust, depending on who it is. And after a day or two, I can trust them to be okay. But I want them to tell me when they're going to go somewhere and not just disappear, right? So that I can say, oh, at 11:30, we're going to be back to the vehicle and leaving and not have to go find them.
Yeah, I have a very similar style in that regard in terms of giving people freedom and encouraging
Yeah,
people to experiment and play and have fun and try new things and go off on their own and do things. I think the thing I've struggled with, similar to you, is that when they need help or they want instruction, you might not be close to where they're at. You might be helping someone else out around the corner or out of
right.
sight. And then sometimes I can leave people feeling like you didn't help them. And so I've always told people, I say that with a caveat. I'm like, totally fine if you want to go do your own thing. Just keep in mind that, like, if I'm not close by and I don't know where you went, there's no way for me to help you. So
Right, right.
if you value the helping part more than the go off and do your own thing part, probably reconsider that process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, so I always
yeah,
like to kind of preface all that with people so that they understand, like, you can do that, but like it might mean I'm not going to help you that for a
right,
while.
right. And you don't want to say to them, actually, you need some help, right?
Right. I mean, I've definitely had a few people where, like, after reviewing their images and, have being with them for a couple of days, like, I know that
Yeah,
they need the help, but like a lot of
yeah,
people are like, I don't want your help. I'm
right,
good.
right,
I'm happy with what I'm doing. And I'm like, cool, man. I'm good with it.
right,
You
right.
know?
Yeah. And we have some of our clients are really accomplished photographers, and you get to know them, and you say, that's
Yeah,
okay, Andy. Do whatever you want to, Andy. You're good.
exactly.
We'll see you at we'll see you at 11 o'clock, kind
I
of a
love I
thing.
love those. Like, that's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
most fun.
yeah, yeah. They're good too.
Yeah.
And then to see what they come back with afterwards in the image review sessions is great.
Yes. All right, Craig. So last question. Who are a couple of photographers that we need to know more about or who have inspired you over the years?
Well, number one, I mentioned my publisher and good friend Laurent Martris, who published. It's called his website is phototripusa.com, and in my books and his books are featured on there. Laurent's a super guy. He was kind of a high-tech person from France. He was sent over from France, where he was born, to the U.S. to lead a hardware software team. And during the big dot bomb era, that job went out. So he said, well, got my camera. And so he became a photographer. I watched his progression. He's a fantastic photographer now. I think one of the reasons he would be really good on your podcast is he's extremely successful selling fine art prints. He goes to a very few select high-end art festivals every year and sells prints for good money. He's got it really wired about how it works. I think he would be anybody that's interested in print sales could learn a lot from Laurent, and just a super nice guy too. So,
Nice.
and my other one is my good buddy Tom Kirkendall. Tom was a part of Muench Workshops for a while. He's gone off on his own now. Tom is the most passionate person I know about photography. I don't think there's a day goes by that he doesn't have one of his many cameras out doing something with him. He's a master at black and white and especially the wet darkroom. He's really good at Photoshop, but he'd much better be in the darkroom, with his hands of the developer, with real paper in his hands, making those kinds of prints. He's really great at it. He's just a ton of fun to be around also. So I highly recommend Tom.
And my understanding is that he likes to sleep on hard surfaces.
He does. Yeah. Tom and his wife Vicky are both total outdoor people. I mean, I know they spend more days of the year, more nights of the year sleeping on the ground than they do in their beds at home.
Yeah.
They just do that. They're avid bicyclists, mountain biking, gravel biking, cyclocross biking. They're long distance hikers. They've hiked all the major true trails. They're both just avid about it. And yeah, the first couple of times I went on a workshop with Tom, we'd get there and, there's two beds in the room. Tom puts all of his crap on the bed, rolls out his thermarest, not even thermarest, a little foam core pad and his sleeping bag. And if there was a deck outside, he'd put it out there. instead. So
That's the
he's
life. That's the
he's
good
a
life.
total outdoors person, a fantastic photographer, just a good person all around. Lots of fun to be with.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
Greg, we finally did it.
I think we did.
Thank,
Thank you, Matt.
yeah, thank you, Greg. And I look forward to doing another workshop with you sometime in the future.
Me too. It's always a pleasure. All
Awesome.
right. All right. Take care, Matt.
Well, thanks for joining me for another great episode. A huge thank you to Greg Vaughn for sharing his insights, experiences, and thoughts on everything from writing photography books to teaching workshops. If you're interested in learning more about Greg's work, I highly recommend checking out his photography books. They're fantastic resources for both inspiration and planning your own photography adventures. Speaking of photography adventures, if you've been looking for an incredible workshop experience, Muench Workshops has some amazing trips coming up, and there are still a few spots available. First up, Autumn Color in Tombstone Territorial Park. This workshop is from August 24th through the 31st. It's just a breathtaking landscape just south of the Arctic Circle, and it offers stunning fall color, rugged peaks, and a true wilderness experience. Only one spot left. Scotland Castles in Color, October 17th through the 27th. Explore Scotland's ancient forests, vibrant autumn landscapes, and iconic castles. Plus, ride the famous Jacobite steam train across the Glenfinnan Viaduct. Yes, the Hogwarts Express. And lastly, Wild Death Valley with David Thompson and me, March 13 through 18, 2026. This unique workshop blends luxury camping with hotel stays, offering access to remote dunes, night photography, and an outfitted camping experience that keeps you comfortable while immersed in nature. If any of these workshops sound like the adventure you've been looking for, email me directly at matt@mattpaynephotography.com and I'll get you set up. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.